Chapter 1301. Collect the Debt 1. Hu Li cast a hesitant glance at young Luo Feng and finally took over the medicine. He turned to the old man. "Father, wait for a moment. Let me decoct the medicine." Then he walked away. "Mr. and Mrs. Yun," the old man said, his eyes resting on them, "if you don't mind, please rest in my home tonight." Young Luo Feng slightly nodded. For a spirit cultivator, even sitting up all night would be no problem. The next day, in the morning, a loud noise came from outside the shabby room in the slum. A man yelled arrogantly, "Hu Wenwu, Hu Li, is your money prepared? If you can't repay your debt, you'll have to give me your lives." Squeak. The shabby wooden door was pushed open by an old hand, and the old man tottered out with the help of his sons. His crutch heavily pounded the ground like a hammer hitting on the hearts of the crowd. "Hu Yuwu, you know what you did." The old man coldly stared at the man standing in front of him, his voice hoarse and dry and his eyes solemn. Hu Yuwu laughed. "What did I do? Why don't I know? How about you? A patient died of your treatment, which is known to the whole Luohua city. Your reputation has been destroyed, and no one can help you." With that, Hu Yuwu raised his hand and a piece of paper appeared in it. A bright red fingerprint was clearly visible on it. "You borrowed 10 million taels of silver from me. When are you going to repay me?" With a sarcastic smile on his face, he looked provocatively at Hu Wenwu. "Hu Wenwu, when you were kicked out of the Hu family, you should have kept your hands off the medical industry and hidden in a corner to spend the rest of your life. However, you didn't want to give up your fame and continued to treat patients. You're provoking me by doing this. Now you are just suffering from your own actions and your tragedy has nothing to do with anyone." The old man angrily pointed at his brother, and his old body trembled with anger. After learning all the truth yesterday, he just wanted to come forward to slap him hard when he saw the shameless face of Hu Yuwu. Swoosh. Just then, a gust of wind blew over. Hu Yuwu failed to hold the paper firm, which was blown away. Hu Yuwu was astounded and hurriedly jumped up to grab the IOU. Just at this moment, the IOU flew forward and fell into a big hand. It was a black-robed man who looked cool, his dark eyes so unfathomable that no one could detect the emotions in his heart. Seizing the IOU, the man gave it to the white-clad girl beside him. And then, the girl raised her hand and the IOU immediately broke into pieces in her hands. The shredded paper floated everywhere. She raised her eyebrows and stared at Hu Yuwu, who had turned pale, and casually said, "Since you said that Hu Wenwu owes you a debt, you should show the IOU. If you don't even have the IOU, how can you come to collect the debt?" At the moment, the streets were already crowded with pedestrians, who were stunned when they heard young Luo Feng's words. The IOU. Didn't she just tear it up? How dare she ask about the IOU? How could she be so shameless? Hu Yuwu gnashed his teeth. "Miss, you think I can't do anything to Hu Wenwu without the IOU? Ridiculous. I can just piece the IOU back together, and then." Chapter 1302. Collect the Debt 2. "Oh." The girl raised her eyebrows and the smile on her face spread. "Really? Then how about this?" Swish. The shredded paper that was swirling in the air was suddenly on fire and was soon burned into ashes. Hu Yuwu felt as if he had been punched in the heart and became furious. He glared at young Luo Feng, his eyes filled with killing intent. "Miss, you'd better mind your own business, or else don't blame me for being rude to you." Young Luo Feng languidly leaned against the man and gave him a provocative yet beautiful smile. "I'm sorry. It is my business now. Hu Wenwu owes me money, and all the people in the Luohua city can testify to it." Hu Yuwu's eyes darkened and he said coldly, "He can't repudiate it." Young Luo Feng raised a faint smile. "May I ask why he borrowed money from you?" "Humph, as everyone knows, a patient died from his treatment and the patient's family asked him for compensation. In desperation, he could only turn to me to borrow money. For the sake of our brotherhood, I lent him 10 million taels of silver." Hu Yuwu snorted. "He'd better not repudiate the debt." "What if?" Young Luo Feng narrowed her eyes. "That patient didn't die." "The patient didn't die." The crowd was in an uproar and everyone looked at young Luo Feng as if they were looking at an idiot. Even Hu Wenwu himself had admitted that the Yu Yang family's child was dead. How could he not have died? However, no one noticed that a flustered look flickered across Hu Yuwu's eyes when he heard young Luo Feng's words. He tried to calm down and took a deep breath. Nonsense, what are you talking about? The patient died. Hu Wenwu admitted it. Are you suggesting that the Yu Yang family was blackmailing him? By saying this, he disassociated himself from this matter. Even if the truth was exposed, it would be Yu Yang Qinren's fault and had nothing to do with him. The time is nearly up. Young Luo Feng looked into the distance, and he should be back now. Early this morning, Milk Tea informed her via soul communication that he had found the boy and was on his way to the Luohua city. Hu Li, young Luo Feng turned to Hu Li, bring Yu Yang Qinren here. Now I'm going to give everyone a good show. Knowing what young Luo Feng was up to, Hu Li he nodded and sped east of the street. After just a moment he strode back with Yu Yang Qinren carried in his hand. Hu Li, you little son of a bitch. Your father killed my son. How can you have the cheek to attack me? Go to hell. Shut up. Hu Li punched Yu Yang Qinren in the eye, and one of his eyes immediately turned black. He fiercely glared at Hu Li, as if he was going to cut Hu Li into pieces. When he reached young Luo Feng, Hu Li threw this guy to the ground, his slanted eyes shining with cold light and his face expressionless. Yu Yang Qinren. Young Luo Feng pointed her toes, stroked her chin and looked down at him with a smile. Now let me give you a good show. Yu Yang Qinren angrily got up from the ground. Who are you? How dare you talk to me like this? Hu Li's eyes turned cold. Just as he was going to hit Yu Yang Qinren again, a black figure had flashed over like a gust of wind. The man lifted up his leg and kicked Yu Yang Qinren away. Chapter 1303. Collect the Debt 3. Under the public stare, Yu Yang Qinren's body fell heavily to the ground after flying a dozen meters away. The crowd was stunned. Looking at the cool, handsome man, they couldn't help but swallow hard. Though the Yu Yang family was not as powerful as the Hu family, Yu Yang Qinren's strength was not bad. How could the man kick him so far away without exerting any strength? Especially since Yu Yang Qinren was badly injured by his kick. He kept vomiting blood and almost coughed his viscera out. They're almost here, young Luo Feng said with a faint smile, her wicked eyes shining with a grim light. Yu Yang Qinren, do you want to see your little son? Yu Yang Qinren shuddered and turned pale. What do you mean? I don't understand. It doesn't matter, you'll find out soon. When Yu Yang Qinren was wondering what was going on here, a young man's voice came from behind him. Master, I have brought you the boy you asked me to find. Hearing the clear voice, everyone looked towards the source of the voice. It was a slim young man. His thin body was covered in a white robe, his handsome, fair-skinned face looked quite young, and his smile was as bright as sunshine. However, what attracted everyone's attention was the little chubby boy held in his hand. The chubby boy, with drool on his mouth, looked oafish. Seeing Yu Yang Qinren lying on the ground, he burst out crying. Daddy! Yu Yang Qinren's face turned ghastly pale. His eyes were mixed with fear and shock, and his body couldn't help but tremble. The chubby boy's cry was like a stone falling into quiet water, causing a great disturbance. Isn't this Yu Yang Qinren's dead son? How is he still alive? Well, I think he looks a bit stupid, not as clever as he used to be. Yu Yang Qinren asked Hu Wenwu for compensation and broke his leg because his son died of Hu Wenwu's treatment. But, this boy, who can tell me what happened? Yu Yang Qinren's eyes were filled with despair instead of fear. He wondered why his son showed up here though he had hidden him so well. Hu Yuwu looked nervous too. He gave Yu Yang Qinren a black look with an angry gleam in his eyes. He had told him to get rid of the boy in case of any trouble afterward, but Yu Yang Qinren couldn't bear to do it. If he was more decisive, how could this happen? So was this the good show the woman in white had mentioned? I'm sure all of you have seen it. Hu Li, who reacted first, said with a sneer. Yu Yang Qinren's son is not dead. He framed my father. He is even worse than a beast by using such a dirty trick. Hearing his words, the crowd began to loudly discuss this with each other. The shock in their eyes was replaced by taunts and Yu Yang Qinren was almost drowned in their curses and reproaches. Yu Yang Qinren is really insidious. His son is still alive, and he claimed that his son was dead. He was just blackmailing Physician Hu. Chapter 1304. Collect the Debt 4. I knew it. Physician Hu's medical skill is good. It was impossible that a patient died from his treatment. Now it turns out to be a frame-up. Now with both human testimony and material evidence, I'd like to see how he will defend himself. Wait, if Yang Qinren's son didn't die, why was he not breathing? Among those people angrily cursing Yang Qinren, there was still someone sensible. That man's question made the crowd quiet down. Young Luo Feng grinned, there's a pill that can make people look like they are dead, but it also has a backlash, which is that after taking it, the one who takes it will become stupid. Nonsense. Yang Qinren jumped to his feet and glared at young Luo Feng, my son had a fever. It was the fever that injured his brain, not that medicine. Yang Qinren's heart throbbed violently at the thought. He took advantage of his son's fever to frame Hu Wenwu, but this delayed the treatment of his illness, which damaged his brain. However, at this moment, Yang Qinren, who knew that what he did had been exposed, admitted everything. Yes, he hated the Hu family people. Was that wrong with that? Would his daughter have died had it not been for them? He had done nothing wrong to seek revenge against them. In that pill there is a medicinal ingredient called heart-losing grass. Every physician knows its side effects. Young Luo Feng raised her eyebrows and glanced at Yang Qinren with a faint smile. Heart-losing grass. Yang Qinren shook his head, it's impossible. There couldn't be any heart-losing grass in the pill. I don't believe it. I will never believe it. Master. Milk Tea walked up to young Luo Feng and held out his hand, I found this in the Yang boy's room. He handed the pill on his palm to young Luo Feng. Young Luo Feng had barely reached for the pill when Yun Xiao held her hand. He tore off a piece of his sleeve and handed it to her saying, don't get your hands dirty. Young Luo Feng smiled, took the rag and wrapped it around the pill. If a person takes the medicine to feign death, he can still restore consciousness as long as he forces the medicine out of his body with spiritual energy. But your son thought this was something precious and saved it. Young Luo Feng handed the pill to Hu Wenwu. Heart-losing grass. Hu Wenwu paused, took the pill, put it on the tip of his nose and sniffed at it. Then his face suddenly changed. The pill does contain heart-losing grass. If young Luo Feng had said that, Yang Qinren would not have believed it. But it was the highly esteemed Hu Wenwu who said this. Even though he hated the Hu family people, he had to admit that Hu Wenwu would never lie. That guy was too proud to tell lies. Since he said that there was heart-losing grass in the pill, it was definitely true. Yang Qinren felt his heart tremble as he thought of it, and his mind went blank. His son became a moron. Because of him? No. It was Hu Yuwu who was to blame. Who, quote. Yang Qinren clenched his fists, gnashed his teeth and spat out this word. Before he could finish, with a swish a flying knife pierced his throat, and he quivered while his eyes went wide in disbelief. Chapter 1305, Collect the Debt 5. You old bastard. Hu Yuwu rushed up to Yang Qinren, kicked his body to the ground and pulled out the throwing knife that he had stabbed into his neck. How dare you frame my brother? That's unforgivable. I will kill you today to avenge my brother. Stop it. Hu Li's face greatly changed. Yang Qinren, the only person who could testify against Hu Yuwu, was killed in front of his eyes. Hu Yuwu, stop it. Hu Li rushed to Hu Yuwu and reached out his hand. When Hu Yuwu was about to make the next move, he quickly grabbed Yang Qinren. Unfortunately, Yang Qinren was already dead. Hu Yuwu, what are you doing? Hu Li coldly stared at Hu Yuwu and anger welled up in his mind. Hu Yuwu laughed, I'm avenging you, of course. This asshole dared to frame you, which is a provocation to our Hu family. How can I allow this bastard to behave like this? Hu Li sneered, I think you just wanted to silence him. A cold gleam flashed through Hu Yuwu's eyes and he simpered, what are you talking about? I'm your second uncle, I'm avenging you. Otherwise, I wouldn't have lent money to your father when Yang Qinren asked him for compensation. I'm always a kind-hearted person. Don't take me wrong. Hu Li clenched his fists and his knuckles snapped. His face was black and the murderous aura around his body grew intense. Young Luo Feng remained silent. After all, she had done enough for Hu Li, and now he had to deal with it himself. Hu Yuwu, I will get the evidence. Hu Li snorted, get out of here. Don't wrong a kind-hearted person. Hu Yuwu gave a sneer and waved his hand, let's go. Followed by a group of people, he swaggered away, leaving Hu Li standing there, trembling with anger. In fact, young Luo Feng and Yun Xiao were both capable of stopping Hu Yuwu from assassinating Yang Qinren, but they didn't stop him. Even if they did, what would it matter? As long as Hu Yuwu didn't admit it, there was no evidence to prove that Yang Qinren was instigated by him. So young Luo Feng and Yun Xiao didn't move. Of course, there was a more important reason. There seemed to be a familiar smell on Hu Yuwu. Yun Xiao, did you detect it? Young Luo Feng asked, and her eyes slightly darkened. Yun Xiao's face was cold and his deep voice slowly rang, Bai Su. Yes, there was the smell of Bai Su on him, which meant that Bai Su had stayed with him. Xiao Mo didn't find Bai Su when he went to the Hu estate yesterday, and we discovered the smell on Hu Yuwu today, which means that they met last night. As one's strength grew, he would become more sensitive to odor. A strong master would recognize a person by his smell, not his look. This was why disguise techniques couldn't deceive strong masters. It seems we need to stay here for a little longer, Yun Xiao said, holding young Luo Feng in his arms, his lowered eyes filled with tenderness. Young Luo Feng raised her eyebrows and smiled, do you want to wait for Bai Su to show up? Yes, he's too dangerous. If I don't solve him, I'll always worry about your safety. Chapter 1306, Bai Su 1. The Hu residence. Hu Yuwu looked rather discomfited. He rushed into the hall, took the teacup handed to him by a maid, took a swig of the tea and slammed the teacup to the floor. A ferocious light flickered across his eyes, and he grimly said, how dare that woman ruin my plan? I will never let her go. At that moment, a wicked voice suddenly came from the beam, making his face change. I told you last night that you would fail. There was indomitable pride in the man's voice, and a faint smile appeared on his wicked, handsome face. Then he jumped down from the beam and landed in front of Hu Yuwu. If you follow my orders, I can help you. Hu Yuwu's eyes darkened. He looked at the man standing in front of him and asked, clenching his teeth, how can you help me and why do you want to help me? He never believed that such a strong man would help him for no reason. The man was not only powerful but also mesmerizingly attractive. No woman in the world would be able to resist his charm. However, this man's aura was so terrifying that no one dared to approach him. My purpose is simple, said the man, slightly squinting his eyes while a sinister smile appeared on his face. I want young Luo Feng. Over the years, the Ghost Emperor had never given up hunting him. He swore he would take young Luo Feng away from him and make him experience that painful feeling. Besides, the man's eyes glistened with a cold gleam, I heard that the Hu family has a treasure that can conceal one's smell. I hope you can give it to me after I help you. Hu Yuwu paused, the treasure is not a problem, but why didn't you show up since you want to take her away? The man turned his eyes to Hu Yuwu. His stare almost suffocated Hu Yuwu, and he felt as if his heart was grabbed by a hand. It was so painful that he almost couldn't breathe. You just need to do what I tell you. Otherwise, your life will be lost here now. Hu Yuwu clenched his teeth. I will mobilize all the power of the Hu family to fight against those people. After saying this, Hu Yuwu hurried out of the hall, not daring even to look back at the wicked man. Master. A gorgeous woman suddenly appeared at Bai Su's side. She lowered her eyes and said, the Hu family can't resist Yun Xiao. I know, Bai Su said and smiled darkly. I don't expect these people to resist Yun Xiao. I just want to give them some trouble. Besides, I came to the Hu family just for that treasure. Their lives have nothing to do with me. More importantly, by the time he stepped into the Hu family, he had sensed Yun Xiao's presence. If he left the Luohua city now, Yun Xiao would immediately find him. So he asked Hu Yuwu to make trouble for them, and perhaps he could have a chance to escape. Have you found that thing? Bai Su asked with a frown. The gorgeous woman nodded. Master, this jade pendant is what you need. Raising his eyebrows, Bai Su turned to glance at the jade pendant in her hands and took it from her. In the same instant, with a bang, his body shrank, and a loose silver robe covered his small body, which looked a little funny. Chapter 1307, Bai Su 2. Bai Su became a boy of 5 or 6 years old. Fair-skinned, this boy looked quite adorable, but his big, bright eyes glistened with a wicked gleam and the faint smile on his chubby face contained awe-inspiring killing intent. I was wounded by Yun Xiao and lost all my strength, so I had to change into a child to recover as soon as possible. Even now, I can still keep my strength for half an hour at most. After half an hour, he would become a boy again. Master, your wound will recover soon. The gorgeous woman walked up to Bai Su, her eyes shining with adoration for him. She was willing to sacrifice her life for this man. She was willing to give up everything for him. Let's go. Getting what he wanted, Bai Su walked slowly out of the hall and disappeared without looking back. The silence of the Luohua city was broken by the clamor of the Hu family people. Hu Yuwu led all strong masters of the Hu family and stormed towards the slum, which attracted the attention of a lot of pedestrians. As soon as he reached the Hu Wenwu's home, he kicked the door open with a bang. Hu Wenwu, get the fuck out! Hu Yuwu thundered with a ferocious look. He was followed by a group of old men who were obviously the elders of the Hu family. Seeing Hu Wenwu who walked out of the door with a crutch, Hu Yuwu sneered, Hu Wenwu, you defected from the Hu family, so you were not allowed to continue practicing medicine. But you broke the rule. Now, in the presence of the elders of our family, I'll uphold justice. Hearing his words, Hu Li became furious, with a raging flame in his slanted eyes. Hu Yuwu, when did my father defect from the Hu family? He was driven out by the narrow-minded Yu. Besides, the Hu family never forbid my father from saving people. I am the master of the Hu family. Since I said there is such a rule, there is. Your father was not allowed to continue practicing medicine once he left the family. Now that he has broken the rule, of course I have the right to execute him. Hu Li clenched his fists, the blue veins in his forehead were strongly pulsing, his eyes were filled with killing intent, and the aura around his body became increasingly aggressive. Hu Yuwu, what gives you the right to execute my father? Hu Lin also stood out and asked furiously. Hu Yuwu said coldly, not only your father but also you and your brother must die today. Come on, take them. Hu Lin's face greatly changed and he hurriedly cried out, my brother is on the heaven roll of the West Province Academy. The elders of the Hu family weren't weak. Even though his brother was very talented, how could he resist so many old guys at the same time? Therefore, he tried to scare them away with the name of the West Province Academy. The heaven roll. An elder of the Hu family sneered with disdain. If what you said is true, isn't it too easy to be listed onto the heaven roll? And, if he's really capable of this, your father would have told everybody about this. How could he endure the bullying in silence? Hu Lin, do you think we are idiots? No one would believe your nonsense. Hu Lin's face turned red with anger and he glared at the men surrounding them. Hu Li. Suddenly, a wicked voice came from behind. Hu Li turned his head only to see a girl, crossing her arms against her chest, who lazily leaned against the door frame and smiled at Hu Li. If you need any help, just tell me. Chapter 1308. Bai Su 3. Hu Li laughed wildly, I can deal with these people alone. By the way, where is Master Yun Xiao? Yun Luo Feng paused and said, he had something urgent to attend to. Hu Li, solve them as quickly as possible. Okay. Staring at the enemy in front of him, Hu Li gradually calmed down, and the rage in his slanted eyes was replaced by confidence. Hu Li, I'll see if you can still speak so arrogantly. Hu Yuwu laughed and commanded all his subordinates to attack Hu Li. Young Luo Feng didn't watch the fight but gazed at the blue sky above, her dark eyes filled with worry. Yun Xiao, you must come back safe. The gate of the city. Bai Su looked at the city gate in front and a ray of light flashed through his wicked eyes. Jinyu, we can leave here now. Hu Li alone may not be able to resist the Hu family, so Yun Luofeng would stay behind to help him. From what he knew of Yun Xiao, he would never leave Yun Luofeng alone. So, at this point, he must be staying with Yun Luofeng. What Bai Su told Hu Yuwu was only partly true. He knew that the Hu family would not be able to defeat Yun Xiao, so he didn't stay long in the Luohua city, in case that man would find him. He hadn't recovered from his injuries, so he had to hide from Yun Xiao. As soon as he regained his power, he would wage a decisive battle with Yun Xiao. However, the very moment Bai Su was about to step out of the gate, a black-robed man suddenly appeared in front of his eyes. His black robe was fluttering in the breeze, his cool face remained stern and his deep, black eyes were filled with killing desire. Bai Su stopped. They looked at each other, and two powerful auras surged out of their bodies. Suddenly, a fierce gale sprang up and clouds of dust were flying up in the air. Yun Xiao, Bai Su's eyes twinkled with an evil light, and he coldly stared at the man in front of him. Why didn't you stay with young Luo Feng? The man's voice was as cold and hoarse as ever, but it contained faith in the girl. Those people can't rival her. He believed in Yun Luo Feng. Even though Yun Luo Feng hadn't broken through to the Sage King level, he didn't think those people could threaten her. Bai Su laughed. Yun Xiao, it seems that I underestimated you. But I don't think you can stop me. If I want to go, no one can stop me. Yun Xiao stared expressionlessly at Bai Su. Do you think the woman beside you can take you away again? Over the years, Bai Su escaped every time because of the woman beside him. Otherwise, he would have been killed by him long ago. Master, Jinyu's face darkened and she cast a wary glance at Yun Xiao. Don't worry. I'll take you away even at the expense of my life. Swoosh. Just at that time, the man suddenly moved. He was so fast that he had reached the front of Jinyu like a gust of wind in the blink of an eye. Boom. Before Jinyu could react, she had been hit by a force. Her body flew out with a jerk and fell heavily to the ground. Blood gushed from her mouth. Master, go, Jinyu cried anxiously, her beautiful eyes full of eagerness. Yun Xiao, Bai Su sneered, how can you beat a woman? Don't you think you are too rude? Chapter 1309, Bai Su 4. Yun Xiao withdrew his hand, his handsome face expressionless, his voice deep and hoarse and his eyes cold. If I let you run away, you will hurt Fenger. And anyone who'll hurt Fenger is my enemy. Rude, so what? In his entire life, young Luo Feng was the only person he cared about. Suddenly, a powerful aura surged out of Yun Xiao's body and pounced on the gorgeous woman lying on the ground. Pinned down by this powerful aura, Jinyu couldn't move at all. Her beautiful eyes filled with panic and her face turned pale. Bang! Just at that time, a white figure rushed over and blocked this attack on Jinyu with all his strength. Struck by the attack, Bai Su retreated 2 steps. Blood oozed from his mouth and he looked up at Yun Xiao. His loose silver robe fluttered in front of Jinyu's eyes, making her heart violently throb. She was only a maid of Master. It was her honor to sacrifice her life for Master, but Master protected her with his own body. Master, don't mind me. You can't resist Ghost Emperor with your current strength. Just go. Shut up. Bai Su wiped the blood from his mouth, lowered his eyes and snapped in a low voice. Then he looked up at Ghost Emperor again and sneered, Ghost Emperor, I will never let you stay together with young Luo Feng even at the expense of 1,000 years of life. Yun Xiao looked into Bai Su's eyes and expressionlessly walked towards Bai Su, and the aura around his body turned murderous. Bai Su bit his finger hard, and bright, red blood oozed from his finger. He smiled. The smile was so evil, presumptuous, and arrogant. Yun Xiao, you've been hunting me for so many years, and you should have found out who I am. He stared at Yun Xiao who was approaching him, and continued, as a matter of fact, I'm not the young master of the Bai family, but the person who founded it. As was known to everyone on the Long Xia continent, the young master of the Bai family had great authority over the Bai family. Even the master of the Bai family was very obedient to him. However, everyone thought it was because he was very gifted that everyone in the Bai family obeyed him. What they didn't know was that the young master of the Bai family was actually the person who had founded the family. Yun Xiao stopped. Though he had already found that out some time ago, he still felt surprised to hear it from Bai Su. I have lived so long that I myself don't know how many years I have lived. I was not from the Long Xia continent but strayed into there because of an accident. And after that accident, my strength was reduced a lot. In order to live safely on the Long Xia continent, I founded the Bai family. This was why all previous young masters of the Bai family were mysterious and named Bai Su. This time, I will make you stay away from young Luo Feng forever at the price of 1,000 years of life. Bai Su's life was so long that he didn't know how many years more he would live. But that didn't mean he would never die. The loss of 1,000 years of life would also be unbearable to him. On hearing this, Jinyu's heart quivered and she said anxiously, Master, you must not use this method, otherwise. As if not hearing Jinyu's words, Bai Su silently mouthed an incantation. Then a drop of essence blood flew out of his fingertip and shot towards Yun Xiao. Chapter 1310, Bai Su 5. Yun Xiao frowned and sidestepped the drop of essence blood. However, the essence blood, wrapped in a bundle of power, suddenly flew back and shot into Yuan Shao's heart with a swish. Yuan Shao, you can't hide from it, haha. My essence blood will keep following you until it enters your body. Bai Su gave a wicked smile and cast a sarcastic glance at Yuan Shao. And as long as my essence blood is in your body, you'll never be able to touch Yuan Luo Feng again. Of course, there's a way to remove it. That is, you find a different woman to sleep with. But in that case, Yuan Luo Feng will never accept you again. It was true. Bai Su knew Yuan Luo Feng well. If Yuan Shao cheated on her, she would never see him again. Yuan Shao's face turned chilly and the killing intent in his eyes grew more intense. With a boom, he released a powerful force and hit Bai Su hard in the chest. Bletch. Bai Su vomited a mouthful of blood, but he still stared sarcastically at Yuan Shao. Yuan Shao, from now on, you'll never be able to touch Yuan Luo Feng again, or you'll be in unbearable pain. But I can give you a suggestion. Find a woman and have sex with her, and then you can remove the blood curse I placed on you. As long as Yuan Luo Feng doesn't find about it, she won't leave you. Boom. Yuan Shao raised her hand again and launched another strike against Bai Su. Being struck by his attack, Bai Su felt as if his body was shattered. If he could regain his former strength, he wouldn't be so vulnerable to Yuan Shao's attacks. Unfortunately, he recovered too slowly to beat Yuan Shao. Your plot, Yuan Shao raised his eyes and said coldly, will never work. I'll never cheat on her. Bai Su taunted, even if you'll never be able to touch her again. As long as this blood curse exists, every time you touch her, you'll suffer from a gut-wrenching pain. Can you stand this torture? For her, I don't fear going to the bottom of hell, let alone a blood curse. Yuan Shao's face became colder and his aura turned chillier. Just when he was going to hit Bai Su again, his heart gave a jerk and he covered his chest in pain. Do you feel it? Bai Su slowly stood up from the ground. Even when she is missing you, your heart will ache. Hearing this, Yuan Shao raised a faint smile. That's not bad. Bai Su was shocked and looked at Yuan Shao in surprise. With a tender smile on his face, Yuan Shao covered his chest with his hand. Even when I'm not by her side, I can still feel her. Wasn't it great? Yuan Shao, are you really not going to find a woman to remove the blood curse? Bai Su's face sank sharply. Yuan Shao raised his head, the smile on his face disappeared, and he said expressionlessly, I won't touch any other woman but her. Bai Su took a final look at Yuan Shao, lifted Jinyu up and lowered his eyes, saying, let's go. Then he quickly turned around and fled towards the gate. Yuan Shao's eyes darkened. He released all his power and chased the two who were trying to escape. Boom. His force hit Bai Su, who stumbled and almost fell down from the sky. Perhaps Yuan Shao's attack was too powerful. A hole appeared in Bai Su's back, and blood gushed out and dyed his silver gown red. Chapter 13:11. Bai Su 6. Bai Su didn't even dare to stop but rushed forward, enduring the pain. When Yuan Shao was about to continue to chase him, a sharp pain in his heart forced him to stop. Master. A gray figure fell from the sky and landed by Yuan Shao's side. Shall I chase them? No, Yuan Shao frowned. Even though Bai Su is badly injured, you still can't beat him. Yuan Shao tightly pressed his chest with his hand. A blood curse at the price of 1,000 years of life. If it weren't for this blood curse, Bai Su would have died today. Yuan Shao pondered for a while and ordered, don't let Fenger know about this. Lin Chong paused and suggested carefully, Master, I think you can just find a woman, as Bai Su suggested. Just don't let Mistress find about it. Yuan Shao coldly glanced at Lin Chong. His cold stare pierced Lin Chong to the bone. He felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar and he shuddered. Go take your punishment. The man's voice was cold and relentless. Perhaps except for Yuan Luo Feng, he had no mercy on anyone else. Lin Chong bowed to him with a pale face, yes, master. Saying this, Yuan Shao turned away, and his hand pressed harder against his chest. Smack. Lin Chong slapped himself. What was I thinking? Master is annoyed at me again. A few years ago I was punished because I gave Master Chunggong too. It has hardly been any time since I was released, and now I am going to be confined in a dark prison again because of my stupid mouth. Master is so fond of Mistress that he won't betray Mistress even at the expense of his life. In the slum. The streets were crowded with countless people, who were pointing at the warring sides and whispered to each other. With a bang, Hu Li stepped back 2 steps. He wiped the blood from his mouth and looked up at the people before him. Sage King level. These people were shocked by the strength of Hu Li. None of them expected that Hu Li had really reached the Sage King level. Unfortunately, even though he had reached the Sage King level, he was alone, while there were so many of them. He was desperately outnumbered by them. At the thought of this, the elders launched merciless attacks against Hu Li again. Yun Luo Feng. Hu Lin was worried. He looked at Yun Luo Feng and begged, "Can you help my brother?" Yun Luo Feng raised her eyebrows. Before she answered him, Hu Li's voice had rung, "No, I can deal with them alone." With a cold smile on his face, he coldly stared at the Hu family people. The Luohua city is quite busy recently. What happened here? Suddenly, an old curious voice came from behind the crowd. "I don't know. We'd better find Hu Li and Feng, as soon as possible. Otherwise, that maniac will find Feng ahead of us." It was a woman's voice that sounded quite charming and attracted a lot of attention. "Okay, let me ask where Hu Li's home is." Ling Hai smiled, randomly picked a pedestrian and asked, "Is there a person named Hu Li in your Luohua city? Where does he live?" "Hu Li." The man was stunned for a moment and pointed to the front. "He is fighting with someone." "What?" Ling Hai's face changed and he became furious. "Hu Li is fighting with someone. That is to say, another person messed with Feng, Who is it? Who dared to mess with my disciple?" Chapter 13:12. Bai Su 7. Saying this, Ling Hai rushed ahead with a swish. Shui Ying shook her head helplessly and followed him. On the battlefield, Hu Li faced the elder's attack without fear, and his handsome face remained expressionless. Just then, an angry voice from the air parted the 2 battling sides. "Stop it." The voice seemed to have a magic power, and everyone shuddered when hearing it as if they were hit by a hammer. Hu Yu looked up in surprise only to see 2 persons were standing in the air. One was an old man whose face was blue with anger, and the other was a middle-aged woman who had no trace of time on her face and looked quite charming. Obviously, she took good care of herself. You are," Hu Yu paused and thought with a frown, "I remember you. You're an elder of the West Province Academy." An elder of the West Province Academy? Everyone was stunned. Why did an elder of the West Province Academy appear here? Hu Yu met Ling Hai by chance. When he was young, he followed his father to visit a lot of places and happened to meet Ling Hai, who was worshipped like a star, so he remembered him in his heart. However, Ling Hai didn't know Hu Yu. He landed from the air and walked quickly to Yun Luo Feng with a nervous face. "My disciple, are you all right?" Disciple. Like being struck by a bolt from the blue, Hu Yu froze. The girl was Ling Hai's disciple. That was impossible. Why did Elder Ling Hai's disciple stay with Hu Li? "I'm fine," Yun Luo Feng shrugged. "The one in trouble is Hu Li, not me." Hearing this, Ling Hai turned to Hu Li and scowled. "Hu Li, what happened?" Hu Li looked at Hu Yu and explained, "This man framed my father along with others. I'm just making him pay a price." "Nonsense." Hu Yu gave him a black look. "It's Yang Qinren who set your father up, not me." "Elder Ling Hai, don't listen to his nonsense. I'm his uncle. Why would I harm his father?" Ling Hai snorted. "Do you think I will believe my student or you?" Then he turned to Hu Li again and complained, "Hu Li, after all, you are on the heaven roll of our academy. Why is it so hard for you to deal with these guys? What if they accidentally hurt my baby disciple?" At the moment, Ling Hai seemed to forget that Yun Luo Feng was stronger than Hu Li. How could these people injure her? But no one noticed that, because everyone was stunned at what Ling Hai just said. The heaven roll. So Hu Li was really on the heaven roll of the academy. Hu Yu shuddered, staggered a few steps and fell to the ground with a bang. His face was pale and his eyes were filled with panic. Now he really regretted it. It never occurred to Hu Yu that Hu Li was really on the heaven roll. "No, I still have Master Bai Su behind me." The despair in Hu Yu's eyes was replaced with hope. How could he forget Master Bai Su? With his strength, he could easily defeat these people. At this time, Hu Yu didn't think about the fact that if Bai Su could really beat Yun Luo Feng and her companions, why would he need to hide behind him? Chapter 13:13. Bai Su 8. Yun Xiao. Young Luo Feng looked up and saw Yun Xiao slowly walking to her. She smiled at him and asked, "How is it going?" Yun Xiao's heart jerked when he saw her beautiful smiling face. He couldn't help but raise his hand to cover his chest, but the next minute, he put his hand down because he realized Yun Luo Feng was looking at him. I couldn't kill Bai Su, and he escaped again. Bai Su escaped. Mindless words could be taken seriously. Upon hearing this, Hu Yuwu's face suddenly changed. Master Bai Su fled, so he abandoned him? No, Hu Yuwu howled to the sky. His eyes were filled with desperate tears and his face was deathly gray. Yun Xiao, let's go and let Hu Li handle it. Yun Luo Feng grabbed Yun's hand and turned to walk into the house. Yun Xiao's heart jerked again, but he didn't shake off her hand but let her pull him into the house. Fenger. Yun Xiao looked into Yun Luo Feng's eyes. I'm going to be away from you for some time. Yun Luo Feng paused. She turned to Yun Xiao and asked, "Are you going to leave me?" Though Bai Su is weaker than me, I can't kill him. Just as Bai Su once said, Yun Xiao couldn't kill him. Why? Yun Luo Feng asked, frowning. Bai Su has a special constitution which grants him not only longevity but also strong defensive ability. Of course, if it wasn't for the blood curse, Bai Su might have been killed by him. So, I'm going to go out and find chances to improve my strength. Yun Luo Feng clutched Yun Xiao's arm and said seriously, I'm going with you. No, the place where I'm going is too dangerous, I don't fear it as long as you are by my side. Her voice seemed magical, and Yun Xiao felt like his heart was torn again. A drop of cold sweat slowly slid down his handsome face. Yun Xiao, were you injured? Yun Luo Feng became nervous and hastily checked Yun Xiao's body. Yun Xiao looked down at the worried girl and gave a faint smile. Don't worry, I'm fine. Fenger, trust me, I'll be back soon. Yun Luo Feng's hand slowly slid off Yun Xiao's arm as she heard this. After a long time, she looked at him again, with a resolute smile over her lips. Okay, I'll wait for your return. Yun Xiao smiled, took Yun Luo Feng's hand and pressed it against his chest. I will be able to feel it when you miss me even if I'm not by your side. What he said was true. Every time Yun Luo Feng missed him, he felt a gut-wrenching pain. Yun Luo Feng tiptoed up and kissed Yun Xiao's lips. When they were kissing, she clearly felt that his body was trembling. Yun Xiao. Yun Luo Feng stopped the kiss and looked at his cool, handsome face in surprise. What's wrong with you? Why did she have a feeling that Yun Xiao had something wrong? I'm fine, Yun Xiao said, shaking his head and trying to suppress the pain in his heart. Feng, you must wait for me. Before Yun Luo Feng answered him, the man had walked out of the house and disappeared from her sight. Outside the city gate. In the thick woods, Yun Xiao was leaning against a tree, and his hands pressed tightly against his chest. Tortured by the gut-wrenching pain, he frowned. Chapter 13-14, Bai Su 9. With Yun Luo Feng by his side, he didn't dare to show any signs of pain no matter how bad it hurt. The girl was so perceptive and even the slightest sign of it would have caught her attention. Master. Suddenly, a blue-robed man landed from the sky and respectfully made an obeisance. Lin Chong has gone back to take his punishment. Master, do you have any other order? Yun Xiao straightened up, his hands still pressed tightly against his chest, and a cold gleam flashed in his eyes. The Central Province. The Central Province. The blue-robed man paused. Master was going to the Central Province. The place where a lot of strong masters gathered. The heart of Bodai can only be found in the Central Province. The heart of Bodai. The blue-robed man asked carefully, Master, may I ask what is heart of Bodai? The heart of Bodai will keep me alive for 3 days. The man's voice was cold and deep, and the blue-robed man was stunned. Keep him alive for 3 days. What did that mean? Since he implanted that blood curse into my heart, I plan to cut my heart open and take out his essence blood. His domineering voice reverberated in the woods for a long time. The blue-robed man was dumbfounded. Did Master mean that the heart of Bodai could keep him alive for 3 days no matter what kind of damage he took? Even if he cut open his heart, he wouldn't die. But that was his heart. To keep his commitment to Mistress, Master was even willing to risk his life. The blue-robed man felt sympathy for Lin Chong. Master loved mistress so much, but Lin Chong was so stupid as to suggest Master finding a woman to solve the blood curse. No wonder Master was pissed off by him and made him go back to take punishment. If Qin Yuan was here, he wouldn't say anything against Master's will. On the contrary, Lin Chong was so stupid. Yuan Shao pressed his chest tightly and looked up at the blue sky above. Fenger, wait for me and I'll come back to see you when I solve the blood curse. When Hu Li entered the room, he found Luo Feng was sitting alone and gloomily staring out of the window. He coughed and said, I've solved the Hu family people, so we can start off now. Luo Feng withdrew her gaze and slightly nodded, we'll leave here tomorrow. You can say goodbye to your father and brother tonight. Okay, by the way, Luo Feng, your husband. Hu Li was going to ask about Yuan Shao's whereabouts when he was interrupted by Luo Feng's voice. He has something to deal with. We don't have to wait for him. Luo Feng lowered her eyes. For some reason, she had an inkling that Yuan Shao seemed to be hiding something from her. Master. Luo Feng was thinking about Yuan Shao when Xiao Mo's voice came from her soul. Yuan Shao does everything for you. So all you can do is to trust him. Yes, all she could do was to trust him. Xiao Mo, I don't want to wait for him here. I'll try to improve my strength and fight side by side with him. She would find him no matter how far apart they were. Meanwhile, on a mountain, Jinyu carried Bai Su and stopped beside a big stone. She laid Bai Su flat on the stone, and her beautiful eyes were filled with concern and worry. Master, how are you? Bai Su didn't even have the strength to open his eyes. Blood seeped out of the bloody hole on his back and dyed the stone red. Chapter 13-15, Bai Su 10. If Master hadn't rebuilt his body and made it different from ordinary people's, Yuan Shao's last attack would have killed Master. Jinyu tightly bit her lip, but, even though Master survived, he will still lose his life if not treated in time. Besides, he just cast a blood curse at the cost of 1,000 years of life. Bai Su's eyelids fluttered and his hands hung limply to the ground. His face was bloodstained and she couldn't see his face clearly. But just now, in order to resist Yuan Shao, Bai Su forcibly restored his body shape, so it was quite strenuous for Jinyu to carry him here and her forehead was covered with sweat. Master, I'm sorry, I failed to protect you and could only watch you being wounded so badly. Jinyu's face softened and she cast a loving gaze at Bai Su, gently stroked his face and smiled tenderly, now there is only one way to save you and help you restore some strength. Even if you'll hate me for it, I must save you. She lowered her head and gently kissed Bai Su's blood-stained lips. Then she lifted her hand and took off all her clothes. Master rescued me from the streets because I have a special constitution. If nurtured with medicinal ingredients, my body will become a medium for you to regain your strength. But up to now, my body still isn't good enough to help you restore all your strength. Quote. But now I have no choice but resort to this means to save your life. Bai Su frowned and tried to resist, but he didn't even have the strength to raise his hand, so he could do nothing but watch her little hand fondling his body. Deep in the woods, a man and a woman were having sex on a big stone. As it was her first time, Jinyu accidentally hurt herself and her face turned pale with pain. As time went by, the man suddenly opened his closed eyes and hit Jinyu violently. With a thud, Jinyu's naked body flew away and fell heavily to the ground. Master, are you all right? Jinyu stood up with difficulty and looked at Bai Su with joy and surprise. Bai Su coughed and vomited a mouthful of blood. He clenched his fists, and the blue veins in his forehead were strongly pulsing. Jinyu, how dare you? Who told you to do this? Perhaps because he hadn't recovered from his wounds, Bai Su spoke feebly, and his handsome, wicked face turned purple with anger. Master, Jinyu bit her lip. Master, did you forget why you picked me up from the streets? I just wanted to help you. Bai Su sneered, help me? What a joke, get out of my face. Get away now, I don't want to see you again. Master, Jinyu was stunned. She knew that Master would be angry, but she didn't expect that he would drive her away. Master, get away, don't make me kill you. A killing intent flashed through Bai Su's eyes. He couldn't hide his emotion and his voice sounded so angry. Master, Jinyu smiled. Her smile was charming yet desperate, and her beautiful eyes glistened with a resolute light. You rescued me from the streets and nurtured me with medicinal herbs because you wanted to restore your strength with my body. But now, it's been a long time since you let me take a medicinal bath. Chapter 13:16, Bai Su 11. Bai Su's eyes grew colder and were filled with a terrifying chill. Looking at the man's chilly eyes, Jinyu couldn't help but shiver. She bit her whitened lips and said nothing. Get dressed and go. Bai Su didn't scold Jinyu anymore. He rose slowly from the stone and feebly leaned against a tree behind him. However, looking at his expressionless face, Jinyu felt even more flustered. She fell to her knees with a bang and said anxiously, Master, I know I was wrong. Please don't drive me away. Jinyu, I'll say it again. Don't make me kill you. Bai Su took a deep breath and closed his eyes. His clenched fists creaked, which showed that he was furious. Jinyu slowly stood up from the ground with a self-mocking smile on her lips. Master, you don't want to touch me. Because of Yun Luo Feng. Bai Su opened his eyes and his gaze shot at Jinyu like a sword as he snapped, what are you talking about? Master, you know whether it's true or not. Jinyu looked paler. Yes, Yun Luo Feng is not only gorgeous, but also gifted and excellent. How could you not love her? Maybe you did want to take advantage of her at first, but as you knew her better, you became more and more obsessed with her. Am I right? Shut up, Bai Su angrily shouted, I just want to use her. If you dare to talk that rubbish again, don't blame me for killing you right now. Jinyu smiled softly, her smile beautiful yet sad. If Master wants my life, I won't mind giving it to you. My life was saved by you. Over the years, I have been following you and demanding nothing. Even though you wanted another woman, I still tried my best to help you get her. If you were not seriously injured this time, I wouldn't have done this to you, so I don't regret it. Swoosh. A fierce wind was blowing towards Jinyu. Bai Su suddenly grabbed her neck, and a chilly light flashed through his wicked eyes. Jinyu shuddered and closed her eyes, with a smile hovering over her lips. If she could die in the hands of Master, she would die without regret. Bai Su exerted a greater force in his hand. With just a little more force, the girl would die here. However, he finally let go of her. And then, as he flicked his sleeve, a force hit Jinyu. In an instant, Jinyu flew out and fell heavily to the ground. I don't want to see you again. With that, his figure flashed and quickly disappeared from Jinyu's sight. However, he soon stopped 100 meters away and banged his fist against an ancient tree nearby. I like Yun Luo Feng, how could it be possible? Bai Su sneered, with a sarcastic smile on his handsome, wicked face. No one could tempt me in the last 1,000 years, and neither can Yun Luo Feng. But I have to admit that Yun Luo Feng is way better than her mother. From the very beginning, he just wanted to use Yun Luo Feng. And there wouldn't be any difference in the future. Fall in love with her? Never. At the thought of this, Bai Su looked behind him. Making sure that Jinyu didn't follow him, he quickly disappeared into the forest. Chapter 13:17, East Province 1. The sun was shining brightly. A glow of fire flashed through the sky like a flame and rendered the sky red. Swish swish swish. Suddenly, several figures fell from the sky and landed in front of a woman in red. The woman frowned. Her domineering gaze swept over the men who stood in her way. Back off. Miss, we've finally found you. The governor wants you back. Not obeying her order, they still stood in her way but answered her respectfully. Get out of my way. The woman in red berated coldly. Just like her hot red clothes, her temper was also hot, as flammable as gunpowder. Miss. An old voice came from behind the crowd, and then a blue-robed old man slowly walked out, with a kind smile on his face. Miss, you've been gone for several years. Could you please go back to the East Province with us? The woman in red scowled and coldly stared at the old man standing in front of her. Even you've come. It seems that he is determined to force me to come back. Miss, the governor is doing this for your own good. Enough. Seeing that the old man was going to continue, the woman in red stopped him. I'll go back to the East Province. But I don't want anyone to restrict my freedom. The woman in red flicked her sleeves, her beautiful face cold and her eyes chilly. The old man shook his head helplessly. In order to escape marriage, Miss went all the way from the East Province to the West Province and hid in the West Province Academy. They wouldn't have found out that Miss was hiding there if they hadn't spotted her by chance. Indeed, with Mrs. Talent, she wouldn't have chosen a place like the West Province Academy to stay. But only by staying there could she hide from them. The old man rolled his eyes and asked, "By the way, miss, I heard that you've been looking for someone, right?" The woman in red glanced at him sharply. "It's my business. Stay out of my business." If these people found out who she was looking for, they would find young Luo Feng by all means and force her to go to the governor's estate. And that was not what she wanted. The West Province. Like a battlefield of ancient times, the frontier was desolate and had no trace of human habitation except for beacon fires. Young Luo Feng, the other side of this place is the East Province. Are we really going there? Hu Li hesitated and looked carefully at young Luo Feng. Young Luo Feng raised her eyebrows. Is there anything wrong with the East Province? Well, Hu Li shook his head with a wry smile. The elders told me before they left that some people from the East Province were looking for the first talent of the heaven role. So, I guess that she is probably from the East Province, and we may run into her if we go to the East Province. Young Luo Feng squinted. The East Province is so big that I may not meet her. Her words made sense, so Hu Li didn't stop young Luo Feng. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of a small figure in the sands in front of him. He was stunned, then rushed up and dug open the sands with his fingers, and a small body was revealed. Young Luo Feng, there's a kid here. A kid? A suspicious gleam flicked across her eyes and young Luo Feng walked towards Hu Li. A little boy in an ill-fitting, blood-stained robe was lying in the dust. He frowned as if he was suffering from pain, and an anguished look was on his dirty little face. Chapter 13:18, East Province 2. Master, there is the smell of a soul fruit on this kid. A soul fruit? Young Luo Feng was stunned and looked at the boy with a solemn expression. The kid has no spiritual fluctuations in his body. Why is he here, and why does he have the smell of a soul fruit on him? Hu Li had already pulled the boy out of the sands and walked quickly to young Luo Feng. This kid seems to be seriously injured. Young Luo Feng, since your medical skill is excellent, can you find a way to save him? Young Luo Feng pondered for a moment and nodded. His wounds can be healed. I'll give him a spiritual grass. Hu Li, find an inn and a change of clothes for him. She had to get as many soul fruits as possible, so she would never ignore any clue about it. Fortunately, the nearest inn was not far from the East Province border. They could arrive there within an hour. Though it was on the border of 2 continents, there were plenty of inns, because many people would come here to hunt spirit beasts. At the moment, young Luo Feng was sitting in a chair at the inn. Holding a cup of tea, she was idly sipping the tea. Suddenly, the door was pushed open by a hand and Hu Li came in with the little boy. After washing his little face and putting on a clean silver gown, the boy looked innocent and adorable. With a timid look on his fair-complexioned face, he timidly looked at young Luo Feng who was sitting in the room. I've cleaned him up. With a smile, Hu Li stroked the boy's head and looked up at young Luo Feng. Young Luo Feng put down her teacup and looked down at the boy. Your name? The boy gave her a weak look. His voice was lowered to a whisper. I don't remember. You don't remember? Young Luo Feng asked, raising her eyebrows. The boy nodded, with a weak and pitiful look. I don't remember anything. Can you take me in? I promise I won't give you any trouble. He bit his lips, with tears in his eyes, as if he had been bullied. Who injured you? Young Luo Feng continued. The little boy seemed to think of something frightening. His eyes were filled with fear. He held his head tightly and squatted in pain. The robbers. They wanted to take me away and make me a catamite. I didn't agree, so they beat me up. The boy was fair-complexioned and adorable, the type who was really prone to attract the attention of perverts. However, for some reason, young Luo Feng had an inkling that his presence was more than a coincidence. Young Luo Feng stretched herself lazily and said gently, go to your room and take a rest. Okay. The boy nodded obediently, took a final glance at young Luo Feng and turned away. Bang. After he left, young Luo Feng waved her hand and slammed the door. Hu Li, keep an eye on him. Her voice turned cold, but whatever he does, don't stop him. I'd like to see what his purpose is. Young Luo Feng didn't drive him away because there was the smell of a soul fruit on him, and she wanted to find the soul fruit through the boy. You mean, this boy has a problem? Hu Li looked surprised at young Luo Feng. Chapter 1319, East Province 3. Young Luo Feng shook her head. I didn't say that he had a problem. It is only my guess, and I hope my guess is wrong. Anyway, Hu Li, keep an eye on him. There weren't many people in this world she could trust. She would not trust a stranger she had never met before. I see, Hu Li nodded seriously. I'll keep an eye on him. If anything goes wrong, I'll immediately tell you. Okay. Young Luo Feng put her hands behind her head and wearily closed her eyes. Hu Li said nothing more and left the room. As soon as he left, young Luo Feng opened her eyes, and an unfathomable light flickered across her eyes. Xiao Mo, did you find anything wrong about that kid? Xiao Mo shook his head. No. Xiao Mo was very perceptive. Even he didn't feel there was any problem. Was she really wrong about the boy? I've asked Hu Li to keep an eye on him, and if he does have any problem, Hu Li will find out. If it's proven that he approached us with an evil intention, I'll never let him get away with it. Young Luo Feng slowly rose from the chair and walked towards her bed. If only I could find the soul fruit soon and help Xiao Bai recover. And then I'll go find Yun Xiao. She had a feeling that Yun Xiao was hiding something from her, so she was going to find him anyway. No matter how difficult it was, they had to face it together. The night was as cool as water, silent yet beautiful. Noticing that the door of the room was pushed open, young Luo Feng frowned but remained silent. A hand lifted a corner of her quilt and slowly reached inside it. Unable to keep silent anymore, young Luo Feng reached out only to catch a small hand. She opened her eyes and sharply stared at the boy in front of the bed. Her voice was chilly. What do you want? The little boy was stunned and piteously looked at young Luo Feng. Tears almost fell from his eyes. I want to sleep with you. Young Luo Feng squinted. I'm sorry, only my husband can get into my bed. You're not allowed even though you're just a kid. The boy lowered his head. He looked so despondent as if he was greatly wronged. You're really like my mother. I miss her so much, so. Quote. A dangerous gleam flashed through young Luo Feng's eyes. Don't you have amnesia? The boy kept his head down, so she couldn't see the expression on that lovely little face. I don't remember the past, but I have a portrait of my mother. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Quote. Squeak. At this time, the door was opened again. Hu Li, pretending not aware of anything, walked in from the outside. He looked sleepy and lazily yawned. Why are you in young Luo Feng's room? Come on, come back to sleep. Pulled out by Hu Li, the boy didn't protest. However, the moment he walked out of the door, he turned around and looked at young Luo Feng again, his eyes filled with attachment and sadness. If it were an ordinary woman, this would have produced maternal love towards this cute little boy. Young Luo Feng, unfortunately, was not an ordinary woman. Her mood never changed because of this boy. Chapter 1320, East Province 4. Soon after Hu Li left with the boy, he appeared in the room again. Just now I felt that guy had snuck out, so I followed him only to find that he came straight to your room. I know your strength, so I did nothing but waited to see what he was going to do. Looking at young Luo Feng, Hu Li explained why he showed up so late. Young Luo Feng raised her eyebrows. Good, keep watching him. Hu Li hesitated for a moment. Young Luo Feng, don't you have a hamster? I think it would do a better job than me. Why don't you? I don't know why. I feel it not safe for Milk Tea to watch him. Saying this, young Luo Feng fell silent, as if thinking of something. Hu Li lowered his eyes. In fact, I think he came to your room just because he missed his mother. The boy looks powerless and harmless. I don't think he is dangerous. Young Luo Feng smiled, and slowly stood up. Hu Li, never judge people by their appearance. The more harmless he looks, perhaps the more insidious he is. I'm still alive because I never trust anyone. When she was still in Hua Xia, her family was killed, and her uncle who was always kind to her adopted her, but as soon as he got her parents' property he changed his attitude. She was sent to an orphanage, where the children who looked gentle and kind were actually fond of torturing people. That was why she didn't believe anyone, even if it was just a harmless kid. Hu Li kept silent and then nodded. I see. I will keep watching him and won't give him any chance to threaten us. Go to sleep. We'll continue our journey tomorrow. Young Luo Feng waved her hand and went back to her bed. Enlightened by her words, Hu Li cast a grateful glance at Young Luo Feng and walked out of the door. Now he understood why Young Luo Feng was so cautious. On this continent, you had to be alert at all times, or else you could lose your life at any time. The next day, morning. Hu Li and the boy waited at the door of Young Luo Feng's room. When the boy saw the door open, his dark eyes glistened with a flash of joy. However, when he thought of Young Luo Feng's attitude towards him last night, he looked timid and terrified. Young Luo Feng's gaze shifted from Hu Li to the boy and she scrutinized his harmless face. You said you lost your memory. I guess you might have forgotten your name. From now on, we'll call you Wu. Wu. The boy's eyes flickered, wondering what the name meant. Young Luo Feng apparently didn't want to explain to him. She gave an evil smile. Hu Li, he looks so cute. When we are short of money, we can sell him to a brothel. In her soul, Xiao Mo, who was trying to pacify Little Tree, suddenly heard Young Luo Feng's words and had an unhappy look on his face. Master, why are you so obsessed with brothels? The first time she saw Yun Xiao, she also wanted to sell him to a brothel. Young Luo Feng, Hu Li gasped, the corners of his mouth twitching. Well, I'm afraid that isn't a good idea. Chapter 1321, East Province 5. Young Luo Feng glanced at him. Everyone needs to work. If he wants to follow me, he has to be useful. Otherwise, I'll sell him to a brothel right away. Hearing Young Luo Feng's words, the little boy became anxious, his bright eyes were filled with panic and an aggrieved look appeared on his piteous face. I can wash and cook, and I can take care of pets. Please, don't sell me to a brothel, okay? He wanted to come forward to embrace Young Luo Feng's legs, but he stopped when he thought of her cold attitude towards him last night. He looked at her with his piteous eyes, as if begging her not to sell him to a brothel. Hu Li knew Young Luo Feng was joking. If she really didn't want to take the boy in, she wouldn't allow him to stay with them, let alone ask him to keep an eye on him. Unfortunately, wherever Young Luo Feng went, there was always some busybody. I never met a person so cruel before. How can you have the heart to sell such a cute kid? A young man's voice came from the side and sounded so angry. Little girl, by doing this, aren't you afraid of divine punishment? Hu Li's face turned black and he coldly stared at the young man slowly walking to them. His face turned blacker when he recognized the young man. Wang Junfei, why are you here? Phew, look who I met. The trash of the West Province Academy, ha ha ha. Wang Junfei laughed, I was wondering who would be so cruel. It turns out to be the bastards of the West Province Academy. No wonder, except for your West Province Academy, who would be so poor as to sell kids? Hearing their conversation, Young Luo Feng glanced at Hu Li. Do you know him? Hu Li snorted. He is from the East Province Academy. We fought once, but he lost to me, so he has a grudge and always wants to retaliate against me. Wang Junfei sneered. I have a grudge against you. What makes you think you're so important? The students of our East Province Academy are all talents from the major powers. Unlike your West Province Academy, where even a pariah like you could enter it. The East Province Academy is an upper-class college charged expensive admission fees that scared off many ordinary people. However, the West Province Academy was different. As long as your strength met the standard, you could study there. Don't get in our way. Get out of my face. Hu Li snapped, with a cold gleam in his slanted eyes. If you refuse to leave, then I'll have to teach you a lesson again. Wang Junfei's eyes darkened and he said with a sneer, Hu Li, I can't beat you. So what? Unlike you, I'm not alone and I brought a lot of guards with me this time. You think you can beat me? What a joke. Guards, come on, get these people. Looking at the two middle-aged men who were approaching them, Hu Li scowled. He never took Wang Junfei seriously, but the strong masters of the Wang family were a different story. Suddenly, a hand fell on Wang Junfei's shoulder. A girl stepped forward, with a bright smile on her beautiful face. Are you going to beat up my friend? Wang Junfei narrowed his eyes. Who are you? How dare you talk to me like this? I'll settle the human trafficking matter with you later. Now I just want to beat this bastard of the West Province Academy. Chapter 1322, East Province 6. Young Luo Feng gave a faint smile. I'm sorry, but I'm from the West Province Academy too, so. Am I qualified to fight you? Wang Junfei snorted and waved his hand. What are you waiting for? Get them. In Wang Junfei's eyes, young Luo Feng was nobody but another poor woman seduced by Hu Li. It was a pity that such a peerless beauty chose a pauper like Hu Li. Yes, in his mind, Hu Li was a pauper. Though he ranked the 10th of the heaven roll of the West Province Academy and was valued by the academy, he still couldn't be compared to the powerful Wang family. With the strength of the Wang family, it was just a trifle to make him disappear. As soon as Wang Junfei finished, the girl suddenly disappeared. Before he figured out what happened, she had appeared in front of him. Bang! Wang Junfei, standing between two men, was kicked out and awkwardly rolled down the stairs. The strong masters of the Wang family were all stunned and then they rushed up to encircle young Luo Feng in the middle. Hu Li stood beside her and confronted them with her. Kill them both. Ignoring the fact that the two were from the West Province Academy, Wang Junfei jumped to his feet and shouted angrily, his eyes bloodshot and ferocious. The two big men immediately moved. Their fists, wrapped in spiritual energy, struck toward young Luo Feng and Hu Li like a storm. Wu stared in bewilderment at young Luo Feng and Hu Li, biting his lips and keeping silent. What happened here? Suddenly, a low voice came through the door. Hearing it, Wang Junfei, who was already in a bad mood, flew into a rage. Get out, don't make me angry. Footsteps stopped in front of Wang Junfei, and soon he heard an angry, old voice. Are you talking to me? Wang Junfei frowned. Just when he was going to teach this stupid old man a lesson, he saw a guard beside the old man take out a token and wave it around in front of his eyes. Wang Junfei's face instantly changed as he saw the three sparkling words on the token, the governor's estate. Are you from the governor's estate? He swallowed hard and his eyes filled with horror. He was doomed. He had offended the people of the governor's estate. The old man said coldly, now can you tell me what happened here? Here is the thing, said Wang Junfei, trying to suppressing his fear, these two are from the West Province Academy. They provoked our East Province, claiming the East Province was worse than the West Province. More importantly, they even dared to insult the governor's estate of our East Province. The more Wang Junfei spoke, the more fluent he was. And he put all the blame on young Luo Feng. By the way, the man named Hu Li is on the heaven roll of the West Province Academy. The 10 people on the heaven roll are all bastards. I heard that they wanted to destroy our East Province Academy and annihilate the governor's estate together. Oh, suddenly, a woman's voice came from behind the crowd. Wang Junfei looked up only to see a woman in red stride in. She raised her eyebrows and asked arrogantly, are you sure the disciples of the West Province Academy said that? Wang Junfei thought about the woman's identity. Since she was with the people of the governor's estate, she must be from there. Our miss asked you a question. Answer her. The old man shouted coldly when he saw that Wang Junfei didn't answer her. Miss. Wang Junfei was stunned. Was this beauty the heiress to the governor's estate? At the thought of this, Wang Junfei hurriedly answered, yes, it is absolutely true. Miss, you must destroy the presumptuous West Province Academy with your men. The West Province Academy should not have existed. After the miss heard these people's disparagement of the governor's estate, she would probably kill the 10 disciples of the heaven roll. Without those disciples, the West Province Academy could pose no threat. This was why Wang Junfei framed the 10 disciples of the heaven roll. He could only frame Hu Li, but in order to destroy the West Province Academy, he claimed that these words were from the 10 disciples of the heaven roll. Unfortunately, Wang Junfei didn't know that he made a big mistake. The woman in red smiled, and her voice was as evil as a devil's, which made Wang Junfei's heart tremble. Sorry, I'm also from the West Province Academy, and I rank the first on the heaven roll. Chapter 1323. The Genius, Hong Luan 1. Wang Junfei was stunned. His face that was filled with astonishment turned pale, and he stared at the red-robed woman in horror. What did she say? Was there something wrong with his ears? The woman in red gave a sneer. Ignoring Wang Junfei, she strode towards young Luo Feng who was standing in the corridor. Hardly had Hu Li repelled the enemies in front of him when he saw the woman in red approaching. He was so scared that he was trembling all over and could hardly hold the sword in his hand. Why are you here? He looked frightened and he wailed in his heart. He thought he wouldn't met this maniac since the East Province was so vast. However, he ran into her here so soon. From the very beginning to the end, the gaze of the woman in red never fell on Hu Li but was fixed on Yun Luofeng. She smiled and asked, Yun Luofeng. Yun Luofeng also stopped and looked at her. The first genius of the West Province Academy, Hong Luan. The smile on Hong Luan's face grew wider, the first genius. If you hadn't been there before, I would have been able to take this title, but now I think it suits you better. Yun Luofeng, I've long heard of your name and I have always wanted to have a duel with you. Would you give me the chance? Some battles were fated. Okay, Yun Luofeng raised her eyebrows, I accept your challenge. Swoosh. The woman in red raised her hand and a long sword suddenly appeared in her hand. She had never underestimated Yun Luofeng, so she didn't concede and took the lead to launch a strike. As affected by the great power of her sword, the doors of the inn all collapsed into ruins. Without any hesitation, Yun Luofeng came up to take this attack. Oh, my God, my inn. Watching the two battle, the innkeeper sadly cried as if his parents had died in front of his eyes. The old man frowned, cast a cold glance at the innkeeper, took a silver ticket out of his sleeve and threw it to him. We have bought this inn. Our miss can do anything she wants here. No irrelevant person is allowed to stay. The innkeeper was crying bitterly for his destroyed inn. To his surprise, the people of the governor's estate were so generous that they gave him a silver ticket with the face value of 10,000 taels of silver. He put away the silver ticket and left contentedly with 1,000 thanks. Rolling his eyes, Wang Junfei wanted to sneak out, taking advantage of the chaos. However, hardly had he taken a step out when a hand stretched out from behind and grabbed him by the front. You can't go yet. Wang Junfei swallowed hard and forced a smile. This master, as the saying goes, he who knows nothing is not guilty. I didn't know that Miss was from the West Province Academy, so. The old man cast a cold glance at him. The killing intent in his eyes made Wang Junfei's heart throb. He quickly shut his mouth and stayed on the spot, not daring to take a single step. Boom. The corridor collapsed and the two jumped down to the hall. With the glint and flash of cold steel, the two were fighting a pitched battle. The tables and chairs were all blown away and the hall was a big mess. The woman in red backed up 2 steps. Standing in the dusty hall, she narrowed her charming slanted eyes, and a domineering smile appeared over her sexy red lips. Yun Luofeng, you didn't try your hardest. Chapter 1324. The Genius, Hong Luan 2. She slightly raised her head and looked at the gorgeous woman opposite to her. I challenge you because I want to know your real strength. Yun Luofeng looked at the woman in red and put away the sword in her hand. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. The voice of the woman in red was confident and proud. I'm confident I can beat you. Boom. Suddenly, numerous vines appeared on the ground around Yun Luofeng. As if alive, the vines automatically wound towards Hong Luan. Hong Luan's eyes lit up with excitement. That was what she wanted to see. Great. She would lose the desire to fight if her opponent was too weak. Boom. Yun Luofeng was very fast. Like a gust of wind, she passed through the vines and reached the front of Hong Luan. Her fist, wrapped by a great power, struck hard toward Hong Luan's chest. Seeing Yun Luofeng putting away her weapon, Hong Luan threw her sword to the ground and her cheerful laughter resounded throughout the inn. Haha, Yun Luofeng, I made the right decision to go back to the East Province. Bang. 2 fists collided in the air and exploded like bombs, releasing a strong storm. Their long dark hair was fluttering in the fierce wind, and they looked very enchanting. Hu Li was stunned and stared at the girl standing opposite to Hong Luan, his eyes filled with astonishment. He remembered Yun Luofeng was only a sage-level advanced rank spirit cultivator, while Hong Luan was already a sage king intermediate-level spirit cultivator. But she could face up to the attack of Hong Luan. What he didn't know was that these vines diverted Hong Luan's attention, so Yun Luofeng had a chance to launch a surprise attack on her. Besides, Yun Luofeng fell into the void mirror and received 3 months of training that made her stronger than her peers. Young Luo Feng would not be able to rival Hong Luan if they fought with weapons, but Hong Luan chose to fight barehanded, which gave young Luo Feng the chance to resist her. Though they hadn't fought for long in the eyes of others, they had actually exhausted their strength. With so many medicinal herbs, young Luo Feng could easily restore her strength. However, she didn't want to cheat in this battle, so both of them fell to the ground exhausted at the same time. Sweat was running down Hong Luan's forehead, but she raised an enchanting smile and turned to young Luo Feng. Young Luo Feng, you are stronger than I thought. I haven't enjoyed such a great battle in a long time. Let's fight again when I restore my strength. Young Luo Feng gave her a faint smile. Okay. Ha ha ha. Hong Luan couldn't help laughing wildly. Her crescent-shaped eyes were filled with pleasure. Young Luo Feng took out 2 slices of the blood ginseng, put one into her mouth, and gave the other to Hong Luan. Hong Luan paused, but she soon took it and put it into her mouth. As soon as she put it into her mouth, she felt that her energy was gradually restored. Thanks. She jumped up from the ground and reached out her hand towards young Luo Feng. Let me introduce myself. My name is Hong Luan. The governor of the East Province is my father. I entered the West Province Academy to escape an arranged marriage, but these guys still found me. Young Luo Feng raised her eyebrows and looked at the crowd closely following Hong Luan, and the smile on her lips grew wider. Young Luo Feng, Hong Luan's eyes sparkled, can you pretend to be my man? Chapter 1325, Genius Hong Luan 3. Young Luo Feng's face darkened. The people of the governor's estate were also stunned and stared at Hong Luan in astonishment. No, Hu Li jumped out first. Young Luo Feng is a woman. How can she pretend to be your man? Hong Luan cast a scornful glance at him. She can disguise herself as a man. I'm not going to marry the man my father chose for me anyway. Miss. The people of the governor's estate were all shocked and tried to stop Hong Luan. Hong Luan looked at them coldly. You are not allowed to leak any information about this. If I find out you do, I'll never let you get away with it. Don't forget, when my father grows old, I'll be the one in charge of the East Province. Her domineering voice resounded throughout the hall, and her cold gaze swept across those people as she coldly ordered them. Young Luo Feng's face grew darker. I haven't said yes. In face of young Luo Feng, Hong Luan was not as domineering as she treated the people of the governor's estate. Her face was beaming with a smile. We're already friends. Now your friend is in trouble. Won't you help me? You can turn to Hu Li for help. No way, I only want you. If it was someone else, young Luo Feng would just leave without saying a word. However, she appreciated Hong Luan a lot and felt bonded to her. Okay, I agree to do it. Young Luo Feng nodded, but you have to do me a favor. What favor? Just name it. I'll try my best to help you. I'm looking for someone. His name is Yun Xiao and people call him the Ghost Emperor. The governor's estate had thought that young Luo Feng would refuse Mrs. Unreasonable request, but to their surprise, she readily agreed. Their hearts trembled all the more at the thought of Miss returning with this woman. They hoped that the governor didn't find out about it, or else they would be punished too. Did you hear that? Hong Luan raised her eyebrows and turned to the crowd behind her. Find that person. Don't come back until you find him. Miss, you? The old man asked, frowning. I'll go back myself. Don't worry about me. Looking at the woman's cool and proud face, the old man gave a wry smile and finally left with the people of the governor's estate. After they left, Hong Luan spotted Wang Junfei who was trying to sneak away. Do you think you can leave after insulting our West Province Academy? Hong Luan sneered. That's too good to be true. Hu Li, beat him up. Let him remember that I'm behind the West Province Academy. Hu Li seemed to be very afraid of Hong Luan and didn't dare to go against her order. Besides, he had been enduring Wang Junfei for a long time, so he rushed up and beat him up. Beaten all black and blue, Wang Junfei shrieked shrilly. Young Luo Feng glanced at Wang Junfei, who cried out in tears under Hu Li's angry fists, and turned her eyes to Hong Luan. When do you start off? Hong Luan stroked her chin. Let's go. I'll get you a set of men's clothes, and then we'll go to the governor's estate. The streets were noisy and crowded. Inside a clothing store, Hong Luan was waiting anxiously at the door. After a while, a white-clad handsome young man appeared in front of her and her eyes lit up. The young man was stunningly handsome, with a smile on his lips. He looked relaxed and wicked yet charming.